Welcome to Wednesday Live, everyone, and the broadcasting of our ROG podcast. We're going to multi-purpose this conversation today. We honor America. For the month of November, we're focusing our attention and appreciation on all of the military service people, past, present, future, and we are really giving thanks and lifting up our appreciation for service members and veterans who have enabled us to live in this wonderfully awesome free nation. And today's guest is Tammy Barlette. I can't wait to share her with you and learn from her myself. She's a retired lieutenant colonel and fighter pilot. She's flown multiple aircrafts to include the T-37 Tweet, the T-38 Talon, the A-10 Warhog, the MQ-1 Predator, the MQ-9 Reaper. These sound like incredible machines, accumulating more than 3,000 total flying hours. A Minnesota native with no ties to aviation, she grew up with the heart to serve her country and did just that. She joined Air Force ROTC at the University of Minnesota, and the possibility of becoming a pilot was presented to her for the first time. That is where her love of aviation began. Tammy completed specialized undergraduate pilot training in April of 2000, and upon graduation was immediately assigned to be an instructor in the T-37. After training hundreds of students, the skills of aerobatics, instruments, and information, she moved to fly the mighty A-10 Warhog, where she completed a routine tour, and after an aircraft injury required cervical spine reconstruction, she transitioned to the Arizona Air National Guard. She flew the MQ-1 Predator and the MQ-9 Reaper, accumulating over 1,500 hours of combat support in both Iraq and Afghanistan, supporting and protecting our troops on the ground, providing real-time reconnaissance and lethal support. During this time, Tammy also graduated from the prestigious U.S. Air Force Weapons School. Desiring to get back into a high-performance aircraft and having a passion to teach, Tammy then transitioned to Air Force Reserves, instructing in the T-38 Talon and the last 6 years of her 20-year military career. Her focus was on balancing family life as a married mother of 3 children with instructing in the fast-paced environment of the Air Force's premier fighter training. She excelled at both, earning multiple awards and spearheading new programs to mentor and grow professional aviators. Additionally, while working full-time, running a business, and raising 3 kids, she earned her master's in Christian ministry. Tammy and her husband, who is a federal agent, reside in Tucson, Arizona with their 3 children. She retired from the Air Force in 2018 after 20 years of service and now runs Athena's Voice, a women's veteran speaking business featuring 13 female pilots on a mission to share the wisdom of women warriors. We titled our conversation today, Social Courage. Tammy, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, thank you for being here. I can't wait to learn from you. So we called it Social Courage. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because I always thought it was interesting that I struggled with confidence, speaking up, kind of being the one that was always standing out, just naturally being one of very few women, sometimes most often the only woman, that I struggled with this courage thing, being confident. And so I thought about it and I thought, why is it that people call me courageous, right? Here I am flying jets and every day, essentially putting my life on the line, whether it's putting my life on the line myself because I'm flying some dangerous aircraft, or I have a student in the front seat who's trying to land a really fast aircraft, and that's just plain dangerous.
Yes.
But yet, courage, when you look at the definition, it isn't just danger. it also talks about withstanding fear and difficulty. And fear and
Mm,
difficulty aren't limited to life-threatening situations. You think about social situations, and that's where my courage kind of, when, you talk about courage across different categories, that's where my
sure.
courage kind of dropped off, was in these social situations. And it was, throughout my life, I kind of felt
Mhm.
that way. But I would press on anyways. I don't know, just
Yeah.
go.
Like, when did you have that realization? When did you notice that paradox between being in this life-threatening situation, flying these aircrafts that are loaded with weapons, you're, a couple hundred feet above the ground, and then you're like in a room with other humans, and that's scarier.
Yeah, I think it had to do with where did I feel the amount of fear in, because that feeling, whether it's
Totally.
because your life's on the line or because you're just uncomfortable, it is fear. And so I always try and always try and go after and try and defeat whatever it is that's in my way. And
Mm,
so this is a problem, right? So if I'm having fear, there's a problem, I think. And so what is it that I'm afraid of? And they always say face your fears, right? If something is a struggle, that's probably the direction you need to go. Not
yeah.
the path that's smooth and easy and nice and friendly. You have to go the other way so you can grow. And
Yeah.
so I think when it really struck me was really actually quite late in my career. What happened was is that I got into an environment where in the squadron I was in, I felt actually for the first time that I was really seen, heard, and people appreciated what I had to offer. Not that
Mm,
I didn't feel like that. I felt like that more as a number in my other
mhm,
squadrons, like, oh, as a pilot in squadron, but I felt like this as an individual, people valued me.
mhm,
And when that happened and they showed that they believed in me, some of that, when my own belief wavered,
mhm,
it kind of filled in the gaps. And although people think, well, you have to believe in yourself. Well, absolutely, that's true. But I think that we're meant to be a team and work with people. So, when my belief wavered and this squadron stepped in by and said, but you can,
mhm.
I kind of grew exponentially and realized my true potential. And that's really when my career started to flourish and I started to really stand out more. Stuff that I always knew I could do, but I didn't, in the back of my mind, but wasn't willing to step out. Now I was, because I wasn't afraid of the judgment. They weren't judging
Mm,
me,
yeah.
they were welcoming me. And that's when I realized that it was the social piece of it that was a struggle for me.
Wow. And so, like, do you remember the individual or the moment, like when that recognition and that being seen was so transformational for you?
Well, I wouldn't say there was a particular moment. I mean, maybe the moment they asked me to go to weapons school,
Yeah.
that might be the moment. So when I was flying A-10s, I had the cervical spine reconstruction, and I decided to transition to UAVs, unmanned planes, are now called RPAs, remotely piloted aircraft, because that's clearly better for my neck, right? And so I transitioned, and they were very eager to get me on the team. And I I just assumed, I mean, initially they didn't know me that well. It was my background. So they
Mm,
had these remotely piloted aircraft that were initially just cameras in the sky. And now they threw weapons on them. And these pilots that were flying them, although they're very skilled, they weren't trained in weapon employment. And
sure.
so I had a background in close air support, which is what the A-10 does a lot of. And now these unmanned planes were doing close air support. And they thought, we want her. They wanted my background. And I knew that, and that's fine. I mean, that
Sure.
was my entry into the door. And I'm not saying they didn't appreciate who I was, but
Yeah.
that background was intriguing to them. And I know that. And so, but then as my career kept going and I kept, stepping up to the plate and doing what I could to help the team, because they were really looking to me. And when they
Hmm.
really depended on me, when you ask something of someone, if it's, high level, they typically rise to the occasion, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you ask somebody to do something down here, they're going to meet you there. You ask them something you think is a little bit ridiculous, oftentimes they will rise to the occasion. And that's kind of what I did. And when I saw that happening, I was like, wait a minute. There's so much more to me that I can offer if I just believed in myself. So their belief helped me believe in myself, and it just kind of compounded to a point
Right.
where I'm now 5 months pregnant with my second baby, and I got a call from the squadron commander saying, do you want to go to weapons school?
Yeah.
And I was like, I literally almost was like, F no, and I never swear. I didn't say never, but rarely. And so that was a big, like, were you kidding me? Me?
Yeah, really?
Yeah. And then I thought about it, and I didn't think I could do it, because here I am with 2 kids. And at that point, weapons school, I would have left for 6 months when my kids were 3 months and 18 months.
Wow.
And I was like, I don't think my husband's going to be okay with that. And I went home and I told him, and he
Yeah.
said, you have to go. You have to go. And I thought, what?
Yeah.
But his belief in me made me go, okay, yeah,
Sure.
let's do this.
Yeah.
A man would do it, because at first I was like, what kind of mom would do that? Leave their kids, for 6 months, and when they're so little. And have I been judged? Absolutely. But it gave him opportunity to step up to the plate and he's an amazing father. And, my mom stepped in and we went and did it. But that was really the moment where it was like, wow, okay.
Mm. Wow. And, you brought up being judged. I think that's an important point to talk about as well, related to social courage. And that is potentially why some people like to be in the shadows or a little more distant, because they're afraid of being judged. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to, put their opinions out there, being at risk of, being stupid or controversial or on their own. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about just your experiences with that kind of judgment and holding your ground?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the biggest things I talk about in my keynote is it's important for us to encourage people to be socially courageous on their own, to step out and to be brave and step out of their comfort zone. But everybody, just like we're all individuals on so many different levels in so many different categories. The same thing happens with social courage. Some people are like, I don't care what people think. And some people are like, I know I shouldn't care, but I do. So I'm not going to step out. And our levels of social courage are vastly different. So I truly believe that, as organizations, we need to meet these people where they're at, help bring them out. And the biggest way we do that is what you talked about, is not judging. So, but how do you, because it includes perceived judgment. A lot of like, even in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to not worry about what they think or what it is I think that they think. So they're probably not even thinking that. And honestly, it's kind of a selfish thought to be like, oh, they must be thinking about me all the time, right? That's what really helped me get over a lot of this, is realizing it's really selfish to think that people are thinking about you all the time.
Right. Yeah. They were like, no.
I don't care. Whatever. But yeah, judgment is huge. And there's so many facets to it. So one of the things I talk about in my keynote is, encouraging questions and new ideas. And people are like, well, I do that. And I'm like, I know you do that. That's because I want to take it a step further. The power is actually in your response to those questions and new ideas. And it's not just the words you say. It's not just the fact that you'll soak up the information, but what's your tone of voice like, or your facial expressions, your body language, and there's lots of things that add to that, because I think that judgment is huge. And so we got to call each other out on it, and it's hard.
Yeah. Right. And when you see someone shrinking because of something that you may have unintentionally communicated, like maybe you made a face, and perhaps to you that face was, I'm curious, but to the receiver of that face, it was like, that was a really dumb idea. And then they shut up, or they, fade. So if you observe someone withering like that, how can we be that cultural shift? How can, I love what you're saying. Like, you almost have to be an ambassador for other people's social courage. Right. So what can we do?
Well, I think we do. And I think that's fair. There's a lot of people who are like, well, if they don't have social courage, then can't even speak up. I don't want them there. But the problem I see with that is that they're already there. They're all around us, and we don't know. And until you make that environment a little bit more friendly, and that the biggest thing I say is remove that judgment. So encourage those questions, and then don't respond with judgment. The other thing I like to talk about is, listen to how people talk. A lot of times this judgment occurs behind someone's back. So what'll happen, well, I remember, when I was a young wingman, I would be in the squadron, heritage room after flying, and there was another flight in there talking, and they would be talking behind some of their pilots' back about a mistake they'd made. And I would think to myself, I'm sure they talk about me like that. And it makes you just go, oh, I don't know. So little things like being aware of the fact that you're talking about someone behind their back. It's not acceptable. And we do it all the time. I still do it. And, we just got to stop. Even just the littlest things, It's so not helpful to just having that environment that makes people feel part of it and that they can speak up and say something. And then the other thing that I like to talk about is giving grace, to yourself, first of all, because if you actually start working on this and you start working and looking at your environment and how much people talk about other people, you're going to find out you're going to be calling people out. They're going to be calling you out, and you're going to get defensive if you're not ready.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel good. Even when I'm like, oh my God, I got to stop, because we all do it.
Yeah.
And then you got to give grace to other people. I mean, like you were saying, we all learn at different rates. We have varying abilities. We see the world differently. So when you try to explain something to someone and they don't get it, don't judge them. Explain it a different way. Find someone else to explain it. They're usually not trying to suck that day. I mean,
nobody woke up this morning saying, I'm really going to blow it today. Can't wait. Yeah. Right. I love that. Giving grace to yourself too. I mean, for your own mistakes, or maybe the way that you positioned something, or your timing was off, or maybe you didn't do enough homework or something. So letting that go and fixing it. And then I love the giving grace for other people and that representation for those who are not in the room. And I think that's so much what allyship is, where you are aware of situations that are not helpful to certain groups of people, or, an individual, and that you're willing to stand in that void for someone and help the other people see what another possibility might be.
Yeah, it's amazing how much, even little conversations, let's say you're in a room and you're talking to somebody, but maybe there's somebody in front of you that you don't realize can hear you. They hear your conversation, and they sometimes what you say may mute them. They're like, oh, I'm not speaking up about that again.
Sure.
And there's little phrases like, I can't believe you didn't know. Like that's usually meant very innocently, but it doesn't feel like that when it's you. Or if you start off and you say, no, everybody knows. Okay. So now you're the one person in the room who doesn't know. How are you feeling right now? And are you going to ask that question? You're probably like, oh, I had a question, but I'm not going to ask now.
Yeah.
Or, the other thing that I think is interesting when people get up in front of a crowd and they're like, okay, so you probably already know this. And then they continue. Now that seems super innocent, but I know that when someone says that to me, I'm like, wait, I didn't know that. I'm supposed to know that. And now I'm going battling inside my head going, oh my gosh.
How did I not know that?
Nobody means that. People mean to be like, make it easier for you, or it's simple. Just do this. And you're like, well, if it's so simple and I didn't get it.
Right.
There's all these inner dialogues that happen inside our heads. And if we can help people not trigger those dialogues,
yes,
it's so much better,
Yes. And when we notice that dialogue is triggered, we could be more supportive. I think that's part of what you're saying too, is about the socially courageous ally or mentor. I know you're a big fan of mentoring, where you see that happening and you could say, what's going on right now? Or, what are you thinking about? Or how did that make you feel? Or, checking in, because I think sometimes we don't even know that that's what's happening, that our subconscious just kind of squashed us or turned the volume down.
That's true. And I do talk about, that's one of the things I like to talk about as well, is that, when I was an instructor pilot, a lot of times I would hear other instructor pilots say, I'd say, well, did you ask them what they were thinking? They're like, I don't care what they were thinking. This is how you do it. And I'm like, well, wait, no, it matters. It matters what they were thinking. It might change your debrief completely. Because there's sometimes I say, what were you thinking here? And he says, well, I thought, ABC. And I'm like, oh, okay. If I debriefed you the way I expected, it wouldn't have helped you. And you would have sat there rolling your eyes inside your head, not really doing that, but like, this is useless. I know that. But now that I know the problem, and that even includes like, how are you doing?
Yeah,
that's
sure.
That doesn't often happen. Like, you got to be tough. Yeah, I get that people have to be tough, but there are moments that they need to know that somebody cares. And that moment of heart just might get them to believe in themselves if they're wavering. So when you recognize that someone's lacking in that belief, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And then they can tell you something. You go, oh, no, you're good. Like, that's fine.
Right.
Oh, I am? Yeah.
And especially if you've built that trust and they know that you're genuinely asking because you want to know and you want to hear, you don't just want to hear good or I'm fine or, best day of my life.
You have to mean it.
Yeah, you have to mean it. And people know that. We have a question that just came in from Sue, our comment. She says, so if you hear someone talk about someone behind their back, do you go to the person or the group of people and ask if they spoke of the person who is the subject of the conversation? Did they already speak to the person who they're talking about? Yeah, great question.
Do I? Yeah. Okay. So I would like to say yes every time. I mean, honestly, you want to be that person who stands up for them, right? You want to be that, like, just like the person who's protecting others. And I'd like to say yes every time, but I no, I haven't, because that plays into the social courage thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's always depended on who it's been. And yes, I have. If I'm more of a peer with those people, then absolutely I would absolutely walk up and say, hey, have you talked to them about this issue? Maybe that's not why they're doing it, or and whatever. But yeah, I mean, and should you? Yes, you have to be careful though. I'm going to be honest, because there are times, obviously, if here you are, like the lowest on the totem pole, and some senior guys are talking, that's probably not the moment.
Yeah.
It could be, like, you could be a hero.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think you really have to read your situation and know. I would love to say that you could do that every time.
Yeah.
But no, but I'd like to. Yeah.
Yes. I think that's a really great question, Sue, and something for us to think about, especially if we are going to be the origin of the gossip or the sideline conversation. We're the person who's starting it or having the gripe. I think that's a really good call to action to our own courage, because like when you talked about that range of courage, I think it does enable practicing courage to talk to someone who we have an issue with directly, and even just checking in to clarify or say, this is what happened today and this is how I felt about it, and checking in, because very often there's more information that's necessary for us to get the full picture, but we don't always get that additional information.
Yeah, exactly. And you and I are both part of an organization that believes in no critics, right?
Yes.
So there's some training I went through, and I'm not sure if you went through the training as well at HPS, but in this environment, no criticism is allowed. And I actually saw it was interesting, because my speech topic falls right in line with how they run their operations there. And I've been through a lot of training in my life, and I have to say, hands down, that the training they give there is some of the most phenomenal training. I mean, obviously, because they're well trained and it's professionally run, but one of the biggest things is because of that no criticism allowed mentality. And I learned about heroic public speaking because I was listening to a podcast, and Michael Port was on there, and he said, we're going to do this, we do this live. It was the last time they did HPS live, but it was some training. And when he popped back on, he said, wait, but I got to make sure everybody knows that we don't allow any critics. If you're a critic, we're going to kick you out. We're done. And I went, I have to go. I'm so exhausted with being constantly criticized. And I realized that, in the fighter pilot community, it has to be, there's high standards, limited errors, direct criticism. It's all, but it's how is it given? When is it given? It's necessary to have those high standards, but you don't have to be a jerk about it. And when he said that, I was like, I want to go there. I want to be able to, try out my speech and not worry if someone's going, oh, she said 15 times.
Yeah.
And so when I went to HPS, this is what's really interesting. So I went in person for training for a couple of days. Yeah. And I remember the first session, there were a lot of moments where I was like biting my tongue going, oh my gosh, I'm thinking these bad things. I'm thinking, she's saying, or that person seems really nervous, or he's pacing, because as we're watching people speak, and they're being vulnerable, they're going up there trying things. It's just amazing. But what's really interesting is that, I stopped myself, and that's the first step, right? The next time I came to this training, for the 3 days, like, a month later, it was all I started to see was all the good things they were doing.
Potential.
All the things they were doing right, and how brave they were being. And I didn't see any of these yucky things anymore. And I was like, wow, this is what it's like. To have that environment where people aren't criticizing.
Right. Because when it's not welcome, then it's not helpful. I think sometimes when people are criticizing, they are trying to help. I mean, some I think are just judging, and maybe they're jealous and whatever. But I do think that very often when people are giving constructive feedback, it could be perceived as criticism, and it's in effort to help somebody to be better. But what they create there at Heroic Public Speaking that you're referring to is that they have these professional coaches and trainers who are going to do that part of it. Your job is to be supportive and to recognize the talent and see the potential and, describe how that made you feel and those really useful things. So I think that it was like it covered off on all of the areas where like you knew that the person was going to get the system support that they needed. And then, you were comparing it to your experience in the Air Force. And I think that I would imagine that in the Air Force, it's more of a science and less of an art, right? Where it's not so much about, creative license or, doing it your way, but it's more of the way. Is that true?
So it's true. There is a way there is a baseline way of how we do things that works very well. But I think that those who bring in their creative, caring heart into their, however they train people or do their job, they're the ones that really make a difference. Because you take the system, you add the heart, and you can, there's so much potential there.
Yes.
But you just have the system, and sometimes it doesn't get through. Like if let's say, just using the scenario of me, instructor, pilot, student, if you have an instructor pilot who's just, doing the steps, and he's not, there's no heart there, he might not recognize that that's not what the student needs. I mean, that instructor who's really paying attention and really going out a little bit outside the boundaries of what the baseline is, can see that potential and go, whoa, wait. Hey, you can do this, or recognizing that instead of just going, have you ever had instructor, a teacher or something say, they teach you something and they go A, B, C, D, and you go, well, I don't get it. And they say, well, A, B, C, D. Well, I still don't get it. And what you really need is them to explain it differently.
Yes.
Like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, or they just keep saying it the same way. And you're like, you need to find a new way. You need to find out what the block is.
Yes.
So that, and when we're instructing, we do that. The really good instructors will go, okay, what is the root cause of this problem? Because it might not be what you think. You dig down to whatever that is, and that's what you go after. I mean, what you see on the outside is the problem.
Right.
And people try and fix that, Band-Aid fix that, right? But sometimes it's much deeper. And that will sometimes solve multiple problems.
Sure.
If you're actually trying to care about what the root cause is of the problem.
Yes. And the individual who's experiencing the problem, because what I'm hearing you say is when you do that level of investigation and understanding, you are helping that person uncover something deeper, which that could be a barrier in so many areas of their life. So beyond the Air Force or beyond whatever it is that they're doing with you in that moment.
Yeah.
So you're helping repair like something deeper. So Sue wanted to clarify here. So she says, so if you hear someone talk about someone behind their back, I'm sorry, it's the same one. I'm sorry. I thought she added another comment. Sorry about that, Sue. So what you're bringing up right now, I think, is leadership and generous leadership, because you're saying it's beyond just the ABCD. Like, it's not just the manual, because if it was, you could just give people a manual, ask them to learn it and carry on, right? But so as an instructor, as a mentor, as a coach, you're working with these people because you want to understand them. You want to know what drives them. You're helping them to get this material like on a deeper soul level type of thing. So that, in my experience, is a very generous act. It's the investment in another person. What are some ways that you have experienced generosity in the military?
Yeah, well, I mean, just baseline, I think the simple fact that the people in the military are willing to put their life on the line for our country. I mean, talk about the most generous act you can possibly have. I mean, what else can you do? Now, granted, not everyone is in there going, I'm going to go on the front lines. I get that. But the ultimately, you join the military, there's potential there. So there's some willingness. And I think that's hugely generous.
Yes. Ultimate generosity.
And the other thing is inside within the military, because, there are a lot of challenging situations. There's, people deployed with their kids home, whether it's sometimes, women have babies while their husbands are gone, or a mom just has a baby, then she has to leave, to deploy. There's just lots of, whether it's training or long hours, there's lots of people who step up in ways that I'm not saying they wouldn't outside the military, but the opportunity isn't there.
Right.
So it really you get a chance to see the generous hearts that are within the
Mhm.
military community. And I'm not just talking about military members. I'm talking about the spouses. I'm talking about the children. I'm talking
Mhm.
about the civilians that work there. It's it's a well-oiled machine,
Mhm.
but it needs to have, the people are the heart of it. And
Yeah.
so they really, they make meals for people when they have babies, and they
Mhm.
watch kids at all hours of the night. They run air. I mean, there's so many things. There's things I don't even know about that people have done.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Yeah.
generous, absolutely. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. And that investment in people. And, when you were talking about the ways in which you have been working through and strengthening your social courage, we can't do that on our own either. Right. We can,
No.
some of it's internal, but some of it requires those allies or the supporters of the people who are believing in you when you don't believe in you sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we're social. I mean, we're social creatures. We're
Yeah.
meant to care about each other. We're meant to love each other. We're meant to, help each other. And although our society has a lot of like, you can do it on your own, I think we're realizing a little bit more in the past few years, especially that, well, we can, but you're not going to get as far.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can get so much further together, even though, I mean, everybody always knows that, but especially in the military, you're
Mhm.
tough, you got this. But inside we all have feelings, and reach out to other people and help them with that. It doesn't show weakness. And just because you're reaching out to someone thinking they need help doesn't mean they're weak.
Yeah.
We all have struggles, right? And you're going to get through it faster if someone can help you and recognize and get you through that. So,
Mhm.
I think it shows strength, and, that generous nature of recognizing that and offering the help, and, being authentic about it.
Yeah.
Don't offer help if you don't if you're not really genuine about it, because it'll be felt on the other side. But
Yes. And don't just give so that you can get something in return, right? I think
oh
that's
yeah,
what you're saying about authenticity.
yeah,
That real altruism, not just the manipulation or the IOU list. But just
yeah.
thinking about payback, something that I am intrigued by is the return on generosity, like the ways in which the goodness and the true altruism and the investments that we make in other people has dividends for us.
hmm
What are some things that you've experienced in your life as generous dividends?
Well, I want to say I'm a little bit addicted to generosity. Maybe it's selfish. I do get a lot back out of it. I love it. Like, people say, "Do you have a hobby?" I'm like, "Do I have a hobby? Do I have what are you passionate about?" I'm like, what am I passionate
Yeah.
about? And I personally I love helping other people. And I think it's because there is that return on your investment, right?
Hmm.
Not because I'm getting something back from them, but because I'm growing as a person. Like, I'm growing my patience. I'm growing my generosity. I'm growing, you know, my ability to, trust and read people and care about them. There's just so much
Yeah.
growth that happens. And I truly think that's why we're here,
Yeah.
is not to get my name in lights and have people remember my name, but to have everybody be better people. And,
Hmm.
we're all in different places. And sometimes I'm going to have a lot of strength, and I can help you. And,
Yeah.
some days it's going to be the other way around. But yeah, I mean, I hope it comes back to me if I ever need it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and you're putting it out there. And one of the lines in your mission statement that's on the Athena's Voice website, and I want to talk about Athena's Voice too, but you write, I have a passion for people, and my communication and relational style is selfless, humble, and caring. I want to change hearts and inspire others to believe in themselves so that they can become their best selves and achieve great things. So it's that vision, or you tell me more about that part of your mission statement.
yeah, well, I just think that whole belief in yourself and getting rid of that judgment, perceived judgment, all that, that judgment really stops us.
Yeah.
And, I mean, one of the, you talk about Athena's Voice, and this kind of brings a really good segue into that, is that I didn't have any intention of starting this business when I was thinking about retiring.
Cool.
Um,
You're like, I
my
served 20
husband,
years, I'm chilling out,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So my husband, actually, like probably 5 years before retiring, he said, "I know what you're going to do when you retire." And I said, looked at him and I said, yeah, Rodan and Fields. Like, I'm a consultant with Rodan and Fields. I started that business so I could like just be at home with the kids, and I love it.
Great
And I still love
products.
part of that. Yeah. And so I thought, yeah, I'm just going to do that. And even though that doesn't like fit the mold of my life, like what you wouldn't go, okay, fighter pilot, Rodan and Fields, you know, but
Definitely
that's the cool thing about the company. Yeah. It attracts all sorts of people. But I said, he said, no, I mean, yeah. I said, well, okay, you tell me, what am I going to do? You remember, he is the one that said you should go to weapons school. So
okay. All right. So he has a good track record, and he selected
he has a good
life partner. So, all right, we're going to give him some props here.
And so he goes, motivational speaking. And I instantly, all I could feel was that tension of,
yeah,
I don't want to be on stage. I don't want people up looking at me, judging me in the limelight. I'd rather be like the person like writing the speech for the person on this
sure.
stage.
Yeah.
You know, because although it seems like, you know, I think our egos, we all have a little bit of ego, right? Like that would be cool, but I really, my heart doesn't want to be up there. It was like, oh, but then over a couple of years time, I really kind of thought about it and I thought, wait a minute.
What if?
I speak every day for my job. Now, not keynote type speaking, but speak in front of people every day, multiple times. And then oftentimes I would get asked to speak on stage about my unique career, and it would be really nerve-wracking. But once I got up there and kind of settled in and started giving, being just generous with everything, because I mean, I told you earlier, I'm very like authentic, the real me. Like you ask a question, you're going to get the answer. And so I would just stand up and I'd tell my story and share a message that I thought was helpful. And the feedback, you could feel it while you're up there. And then when I get off the stage, so many people come to me and say, thank you for telling me like it is. And I'm like, what else would I do? I mean, how else are you supposed to do this? Yeah. And I kind of realized that, combined with the fact that I started and ended my career at the same base. So I was instructor pilot at Laughlin for my first assignment. I retired as an instructor pilot at Laughlin in a different aircraft, and the numbers of women weren't increasing. It was the same environment that I had gone through almost exactly. I mean, there was a little bit of stuff cleaned up, and I thought, you know, I don't ever think it's going to be 50-50. And that I was not expecting that ever. But the simple fact that I hear people saying, well, I can't do it because I want to have family, or I can't do, I'm like, wait a minute. I thought about the WASPs. And if you're not familiar with the WASPs, they were women that flew in World War II. They flew all the aircraft. They did amazing things. And then when their time was up, they're like, see ya. And they just went back to their own lives. And a lot of them didn't tell their stories. Nobody knew what they did. Many people haven't even heard of them. Wow. And I realized, man, if they had gotten their stories out, then maybe some of the things that the women, when they started flying again, really in the 70s, went through, they wouldn't have had to go through again. So what I like to say is there's a path, there's a big wooded area and you got to get through it. And if you go to dig a path out, you got to light it for those behind you, because otherwise they're going to start digging a new path and they might not even get as far as you did. But if they start going up your path, they can take it further. So my goal is really with this business and me getting up the stage was to take that light and shine it on that path behind me so that people can take my path and go further than I've gone. Because that's the way we're going to get there. And so I thought I need to be generous with my experience and wisdom that I've gained over the years. I mean, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah,
share it.
exactly.
I can share it.
Right. There's a reason that you have it and that you're being responsible with it. That you're carving out the path. So why Athena's voice? What is the reason for the name?
So my business, or my co-founder, Heather Penny, she was out speaking already. And so when I went to look into this, I thought, well, I'm going to ask somebody who knows. That's what you do, right? You find a mentor.
Sure.
And her and I sat down and she said, you know what? We should start a business. She's like, there's not enough women out there speaking. I mean, men talk about awesome leadership. I mean, they're out there killing it, and let's go kill it with them, right? I mean, men talking to women and men. Women can talk to men and women. Obviously, we have a huge audience in women alone. We'd love to speak to just women, but we also can speak to men because that's valid and that's fair, and we need to do that. We need to get out there in the world. But the name comes from, so we said, well, what are we going to name it? And we thought, well, Athena, she's the goddess of wisdom and war. And so Athena's voice being, speaking. So yes, I love it.
It's the voice of wisdom of women warriors. So it's all veterans, right?
It is all, combat veterans. Yep. And
Combat
so we
veterans.
started with all female fighter pilots because that's a known quantity, if you will. So we
Yeah.
were both part of this organization called the Chick Fighter Pilot Association.
Yep.
Totally casual. Melissa Shockmay and a few other ladies, F-16 pilots, started it. Phenomenal idea that really connected us all. Because a lot of us were alone where we were at, and we needed some, mentorship and some help. And
Sure.
so we got all connected, and that's how I met Heather. And so that's also where we grabbed from that group of people. And some of them we had to kind of pull, like my husband had to, poke at me to go, hey, do this. Because they didn't want to be in the limelight, because most of us did not do this job, did not pave this path so that we could be in the limelight. We did it just because it was something we wanted to do. But I feel like now we have an obligation to help those behind us. Now that we've been there, done that, and not let them struggle through what we struggled through.
No
There's
kidding.
no reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. There's no reason for that. And you had to fight it. You had to figure it out. So let's try to relieve some of that pressure for them being that pioneer in some cases. I mean, everybody's the pioneer of their own story, but the path, like I love the description of that path through the woods. Like, you've been chopping branches down for a while, so you might as well like show them the way. And that's so gratifying too. I think that there's like a ripple effect of your own pain and your own sacrifice that you can benefit from by paying it forward and being a mentor to others. So when you were, I just want to geek out on aircrafts for a minute.
Oh no.
I don't know anything. So I'm fascinated by your story, and having heard you talk about these different like machines, like even just the names of some of them, I find really crazy, like the Predator, the Reaper, and the A-10 Warhog. I mean, you tell me, give me an example of like the wildest machine that you have ever piloted.
Well, so it's the Warthog.
Warthog. Okay.
Like as in that big boar.
Okay.
And that's actually its nickname. It's actually the Thunderbolt.
Okay.
I think the Thunderbolt too. Yeah. So that was hands down the machine that of all the ones that I flew that had the most capabilities.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I remember you hearing me talk about it. You probably watched that little video.
Oh, sure.
Excuse my reach. So this is one of the bullets from the plane. It carries 1,150 of these, and it shoots about 69 rounds a second. So and the whole aircraft was built around that gun. And then the pilot actually sits in a titanium tub. The aircraft, it carries bombs, missiles, rockets. It's meant to fly low level, and the wings are big fat wings so that it can really make a hard turn. It doesn't go super fast. When you think fighter pilots, people think F-16, they probably, they think Top Gun, and those go a lot faster. But when you're flying, 200, 500 feet off the ground in mountainous territory or terrain, it's all relative, right? So, and you want to be able to, pop over the mountain and roll and get down, because you don't want the enemy to see you, right? So you don't want to profile up there. There's a lot of amazing things about it. Then you're wearing all this gear.
Yeah. And are you solo?
You are. The A-10 actually has no two-seat models. So the first time you fly it, you're by yourself. Your instructor will help make sure you're strapped in. You kind of know where everything is, and then you taxi out and you take off, and they chase you around. But you have to be the one. if something happens, it's up to you. So
yeah. And do you know the reason why it's called a Warthog?
Because, I'm going to guess here. I think it's because people think it's really ugly. If you see the plane compared to like a sleek F-16, there's the A-10, right? But it's a beast.
But it's a beast.
In our eyes, A-10 pilot size, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Right. And it's also so intricate.
And it's interesting. The reason, why did I choose it? And it was a struggle, because I remember when I was choosing my platform, what do you want to fly? And it's a request / based on your performance, and they match you up. Sure. And I actually struggled a bit. I actually went to a chaplain, and I'm like, I don't know. These things kill people. No, that has to happen, unfortunately, in the world to protect people, but it was a battle. And he said, you know what, we want people like you doing this job who are thinking about what they do. And then I went to a friend who flew the A-10, and I said, I don't know if I can do this, because the A-10 flies so low that I might actually see, which, I mean, that you should, right? I mean, if you're going to do this, right? And this pilot made a really good point. And she said, yeah, but you're also going to see who you're protecting. And that's the thing about the A-10, is that it's about protecting our troops when they're in trouble. That's what we do. And so when they need help, they call us in, and we, you know, we put ourselves out there to try and protect them, because I mean, sometimes they get in a situation where they need more firepower. And, you know, a lot of times you can just like show of force, where you just fly over the enemy and they're like, whoa, okay, we're out.
Yeah, right. But the threat is,
don't want any of that.
Yeah.
So that's the ideal situation, right?
Right. Ideal situation for sure. I mean, can you share with us how you train your brain to stay focused on the mission and not how severe that situation is when you're in one?
You know, it comes down to training. It really does.
Yeah.
I absolutely think it does. You know, there are moments when as a mother, I would go fly and come back and land, and I thought, oh my God, I have not thought about my children in like 2.5 hours. I'm a terrible mom. And then I went, wait, no, because of my job, it's important that I do that so that I can come home safely and not be distracted by the thoughts of, are they getting their diaper changed? Did they take a nap today? You know, like I can trust someone else can handle this.
Yes.
And that leads me into, how do you get, you know, you asked me, how do you get there? How do you get to that point where you're just, you know, focused? And it really comes down to training. In the military, we do a lot of repetitive, stressful training where you're put under the gun to memorize things and to get up in front of I mean, one of the first things we do is get in front of our classmates. We get called up for stand-up. So they literally will say, okay, you're on initial takeoff, you're passing this many knots, you rotate, you get airborne, and then boom, you hear a noise and you see a fire light. Lieutenant Ward, which is my maiden name, you have the aircraft. And then you stand up with your checklist at attention with all these people looking at you. You're like, sir of the aircraft, I'm going to maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, take the proper action, and land as soon as conditions permits. And then you go through this. So then you go through this stuff. I mean, you have to have that, because, and that's fake stress, right? To see how you perform under pressure. Because if you can't even do it standing in that room, you're not going to be able to do it in the air when you really have a fire, or you hit a bird, or you're, you know, diving at the ground and you need to figure out, oh, I need to put it in manual reversion to get this aircraft under control again, or whatever it might be. So the training is really regimented and very hefty, so that when you get to those points, it is what it is. You just go into, because whenever I had an emergency, with the exception of the one time that I didn't get enough sleep, which is dangerous. Every other time I had an emergency, it just kicked in. Boom, 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 done, land, fine. People are like, how'd you do it? I'm like, I don't know. You guys trained me.
I just did what I was trained to do.
You guys did this.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, is it one of those things though, when you land, are you like, whoa, I just did that?
You think so? Yeah. It does kick in a little bit.
Yeah. That realization of performance, performance under pressure, and realizing that all that training paid off.
And I think it's more the reactions of other people that makes it a little bit like, whoa, because when you're in it, you're like, okay, I'm trained for this. I do this. The plane flies on one end. Because I did have a situation where I lost my engine in Korea. I hadn't flown in 3 months, had never flown in Korea before. So my first flight there, boom, I have to shut the engine down, landed another airfield. Like, it was okay. But it didn't feel like that big of a deal. But then I was like, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. You know, I just did what I needed to do. And then I get back to the squadron and people are like, you know, the last guy who lost an engine, he crashed the jet. It crashed and he had to eject. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, like,
so it sounds like you have a really good disposition for this kind of stress, like that you can take it in stride, or you know, do what you're trained to do. You're not going to let your emotions cloud the way to see forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think emotions are important. I'm not one to push aside emotions. I think they matter, but they need to matter in the right moments. You know. Yeah.
How has this training helped you in your life now? How has this 20-year experience informed like how you live your life right now, how you manage being a mom and business owner and all the things that you're doing now, and a wife and a daughter?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to, you know, learning that, I mean, perfection is, you can strive for it. I mean, you can shoot for it, but don't make that. That's not, I mean, that's not a realistic goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important that we recognize that. And, you know, having structure was definitely super, super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, structure makes things a lot better. But what we like to talk about in the military in the flying world is, you know, go with the 80% solution. And so
Ah,
what does that mean? That means like when you don't, if you wait for it to be perfect, you're never going to pull the trigger. You're never going to do it. So, okay, I'm at 80%, we're going to go and then we'll fix what we need to fix later.
mm-hmm.
And that's way better than waiting till you, and I think that's one of the biggest lessons I learned, that especially that applies to the business, is I'm like, gosh, this is a totally new world to me. I mean, I know how to fly a jet, but now I'm running a business and there's a lot to it. I recognize that. And I know I'm not an expert, so I seek mentorship and whatever, you know,
Sure.
whatever else. But I also don't wait until I think it's perfect to execute. I just, okay, we're about at 80.
Yeah,
Let's go.
that's such good advice and really helpful. And I think it's as helpful now as any time, but right now in a time where there's so much imperfection and things are not ideal, to give ourselves permission to get it good enough to,
Yeah.
have enough of a plan to move forward, and like you said, fix what else needs to be fixed if that's even necessary.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I learned that I apply to life is work the target backwards. So when we
Mm,
target plan, you know, we go, well, what's the target? You know, what do we need to take it out? What kind of weapon do we need? What kind of altitude do we need to go come in from? Which direction? What's the weather going to be? And then you go all the way to back to takeoff. You know, like, so you
ah,
start from the target and then you go backwards. But how does that apply to us now? Like, how can I use that now? Well, I think about days when I'm running around kind of haphazardly doing random tasks that are on my sheet. I don't have them prioritized. I have to stop and I go, work the target backwards? Like, what's the
mm.
first threat today? And a lot of times it'll be a threat like dinner. Okay, dinner
That-
is the one thing that
okay.
has to happen, and I have to start it by this time, and I have to get these ingredients. Like, and I know that sounds so silly, but you can do it in business too. But like, what are the things that must get done, and when do you need to start them? So then I can do other things up until that point. But then, you know,
Mhm.
that's, so the prioritization has been very helpful. You know,
Yes.
and we also talk about when we mission plan, we plan for most likely scenario and worst case scenario. Now you can't
Mm.
plan for all contingencies. We do a lot of contingency planning. We hit the most likely, but you know, like, okay, what's most likely that's going to happen and what's worst case. So like when I did a keynote last week, I sent him a presentation as a backup in case we had tech issues.
Sure.
We didn't have to use it, but that was worst case. Like, oh, comm doesn't work. You know.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and so you have that backup plan. You've thought about worst case scenario enough,
Mhm.
not to the point of obsession, it doesn't sound like, but to
Right.
the point of consideration. Like, okay, so what if
Yeah.
that happens or that happens? I love that. And then working the target backwards is a great way to approach your day, your year, coming into the close of this year. It's like going into 2021, what are some things that we want to target and how can we prioritize the steps needed to get there? Sue posted here about the Smithsonian Channel states that the warthog is the ground soldier's best friend. Such an honor to hear from someone who has the skill to fly that plane. So true. Oh, shoot. Wait, you're muted. Wait a second. I don't know what's going on here with this. Isn't that weird? I don't know if anybody else can hear that. I don't know why that's happening. I think it was all that talk about worst case scenario. No, I'm just kidding. Can you still hear me? I mean, but you can't see me. That's so strange. Oh my gosh. Sorry, everybody. Oh, it just went away. Okay. All right. Let me see if I can hear you now. No, I cannot hear you. All right. She's just going to come back. So if anybody's got any last minute questions for Tammy, please type them in the chat because we're just about to wrap up our conversation here. Let's see. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It was my system. We just made that happen, right?
Yeah, isn't it crazy? And those are the worst things that happen these days, is that we can't hear people or see them. So glad that worked out well so that we could close, because I'm deeply grateful for your service, for your sacrifice, for your family's sacrifice, because I know that when, an individual like you who has a family and your husband has been so generous, your children have been so generous, that our country is what it is because of people like you.
Thank you. It was an honor to do it, and I was proud to be, in the military. So
yeah, it's an awesome honor, and I'm so grateful that you're continuing to serve in this way with Athena's Voice. So just I'll make sure that the links to all of that are in the notes. But for those who are just listening to this on audio, what are ways that people can get access to your work and partner with you in their organizations?
Yes, I would love it if people wanted to connect. First of all, you can email us at inspire@athenasvoiceusa.com. Our website is athenasvoiceusa.com. On social platforms, we are Athena's Voice USA. And if I could ask a huge favor of your audience, we would love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Athena's Voice. When COVID started, we started creating a bunch of 3 to 4 minute videos that all have like a short story with a message that really is applicable to pretty much everyone. And they're very short, and it's a variety of ladies from all of our speakers. I would love it if you would check those out and share those if you find those helpful.
Yes, I agree. I find them helpful, and I totally would recommend them to others. I mean, the one that you talked about with clear communication, outstanding. And, it's the number one need in every organization that I work in. Clear communication ranks at the top of the list. And I don't even know, it was like 3-4 minutes. You just gave some really practical, you gave a real life example from your experience and a process that we could consider using. So,
yeah, thanks. We try to keep them short because we don't have a lot of time. And
yeah, and it's like those bites that we can go, okay, I can practice that today. I can work on that, the C's today. So it's Athena's Voice on YouTube.
On YouTube, it's just Athena's Voice. Everywhere else is Athena's Voice USA, because we wanted to keep the handle the same for all the platforms.
Okay. Well, that's awesome.
Although one of our speakers does live in Turkey. So.
Mixing it up. Yes. Oh, well, thank you, Tammy, for sharing your experience with us, for encouraging us to strengthen our social courage. Your shirt says "Be socially courageous," as a great reminder of us to really to strengthen that. So, can you give us just one little bit of advice to strengthen our social courage? How can we do it?
I think the biggest way is just to make black and white decisions. Just to go, I am going to, and pick something small. Like today, if I have a question in my staff meeting, I'm gonna raise my hand and ask it, no matter how I feel. Like, I think it's just to make these small bites that you can, literally make a black and white and go, I'm gonna do this, and just step out slowly.
Yeah. That is awesome. All right, everybody, you heard it here. So this is Tammy Barlette, who is amazing and a veteran, and being out there serving us and giving us this encouragement to take one step forward out of our comfort zone to build our social courage. Thank you so much. So please join us next week on 11/11, which is Veterans Day. And we're going to learn from Courtney Lynch, who served as a Marine Corps officer. And you can also check out our new podcast, which this interview is going to be leveraged for that as well. It's ROG, Return on Generosity, which you can find on our website, bridgebetween.com. So give thanks and honor the service members and veterans in your life, everyone. Have a great week.